In the misquoted words of Bruce Willis, Zeb's dead, baby.
Zed's dead.
And by dead, I mean that Zeb Wells is no longer writing Amazing Spider-Man, so he's dead to me. But what comes next? Well, Spider-Man's going to die a lot in The 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, and here is everything that you need to know going in. Now, if you clicked on this video just for a reading list of what you need to read before the issue this week so that you're all prepared, here it is. You need to read Amazing Spider-Man issue 50, the backup within that. You need to read Amazing Spider-Man 60, the backup within that. And you need to read The Fist of Khonshu. That's everything so far that has been teased towards the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. You could also read Blood Hunt, the whole event, or you could read Blood Hunt issue 5 to get a sense of why Dr. Doom is the way he is. That is, without spoilers, the things you need to read. Feel free to go now and do that. Maybe like this video, leave a comment and say thank you, but go away, you're all good. And now let's talk spoilers and let's talk about the story and the status quo that you need to know before you start 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. The basic premise of 8 Deaths of Spider-Man is that Dr. Doom is the Sorcerer Supreme. We'll get to that. And Spider-Man has been tasked with something that the Sorcerer Supreme has to do every year, which is renew some contract with a god called Cyttorak. It will be deadly, and he's granted extra lives so that he can die multiple times and still fulfill this contract. Now, you may recognize the name Cyttorak. I'm not going to go into the full backstory of him. He's been part of Doctor Strange lore for a long time. Where you probably most know him from is he is the god that grants Juggernaut his powers. Now, Juggernaut is super strong and super indestructible with a fraction of Cyttorak's powers, and so Spider-Man's going to be going up against the full fat version of Cyttorak the god and whatever that entails. To help Spider-Man defeat Cyttorak, he's also going to be given a new suit. So if you see him in a grey suit with this kind of red scarf, that's his new suit. It's magically designed to help him defeat a god. You'll also notice that there are gemstones, 8 gemstones in the spider here, and those signify the lives. So after he dies, each of the little gemstones will get snuffed out in some way. So pay attention to how many of those gemstones are still glowing when he fights. That's what we know. So what have we already seen? The first thing we saw about this storyline in canon was in Amazing Spider-Man issue 50. There was a backup written by Joe Kelly. In that backup, Spider-Man goes to Doctor Strange for help. It doesn't matter about what. And Doctor Strange is in a bad way. He's very clearly physically injured, physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. And we get a sense that he has gone through some kind of trial, which we now know is the trial that Spider-Man will be going through, which he has 8 extra lives for. So it was cryptic at the time, and it was a little tease that maybe Joe Kelly would be doing something on the title. But now you can go back and read it, knowing where it's going. The next thing we saw was a backup in the issue Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu issue 0, which was dropped on the week. It was announced and dropped the same week. It was a tease that Moon Knight was coming back from the dead. In the issue, Peter and Miles are swinging through the sky. There's a big moon, and they're talking about ice cream, and they're talking about science and magic. We also get a look at Cyttorak, which is the god that Doctor Strange made a deal with, and that Spider-Man is going to be dealing with in his 8 Deaths of Spider-Man trials. There's not a whole lot to say about this backup. It just adds a little bit of flavor. Then, just to fill in this gap, you have Blood Hunt issue 5, which is where Dr. Doom became Sorcerer Supreme. So you may be wondering, how does Dr. Doom become Sorcerer Supreme? There was an event called Blood Hunt, where basically vampires took over the world. The sky went black all around the world, sucking out the dark force to kind of blacken the sky, and a whole bunch of Avengers were turned into vampires, including Doctor Strange, but he was able to remove his kind of astral self, and so while his body was a vampire and undead, he was hanging around as an astral self. Now, they needed the Sorcerer Supreme to cast magic to stop all these vampires, but Doctor Strange couldn't do that because he was undead. And so Dr. Doom comes along and says, hey, I'll be Sorcerer Supreme for you. And they make a deal. After he's done saving the world, he will give back the Sorcerer Supreme mantle and the Sorcerer Supreme powers back to Doctor Strange. And so Doctor Strange takes him at his word, and he grants him the Sorcerer Supreme powers, and Dr. Doom saves the world, does a huge kind of rainbow magic thing. It's an incredible looking art. And then the world is saved, and all the vampires are stopped, and hey, we've won. Except that when Doctor Strange comes and says, you've saved the world, can I have my powers back? Dr. Doom says, no, I haven't saved the world, I've just gotten started. And that he's going back on his word. He's kind of rewording it, and he's remaining as the Sorcerer Supreme for a while. It's going to lead to a big event next year, One World Under Doom, but it's also the status quo when we go into this story. So at the start of this story, Doom, as Sorcerer Supreme, knows that every year he has to make this deal with Sitarak, which we're not entirely sure what that entails. And Doctor Doom doesn't want to do it, because he's Doctor Doom. How can he reduce himself to doing a task like that and it potentially injuring himself? So he convinces Spider-Man to do it in his place. And that leads us to issue 60 of Amazing Spider-Man, which was the end of Zeb Wells' run, but it also featured a tease for what's to come. And basically this story had Spider-Man breaking in and stopping some tech crime whilst Doctor Doom was viewing him via magic. And Doctor Doom was talking about his strengths and how he'll always give everything to help save the day, and basically choosing him as his champion. He might not be the strongest, he might not be the most mystically powerful, but Spider-Man has skills that will deal him well in this trial. And so those are the 4 stories that you need to read. This arc is being written by Joe Kelly and Justina Ireland. Now, Joe Kelly has written Amazing Spider-Man before. Most recently, he wrote something in Volume 6 in Zeb Wells' run, a 2-parter where Peter and Black Cat go on a romantic getaway and foil a bunch of villains. He's also written back in the sort of Brand New Day era when there was a Spidey writer's room. He most notably has written Deadpool and written Spider-Man alongside Deadpool there, and that's kind of his sense of humor. I would also recommend checking out Non-Stop Spider-Man and Savage Spider-Man, which is all one storyline, which he wrote fairly recently, and his independent comic, I Killed Giants. Justina Ireland is the first black woman to write for Amazing Spider-Man. In the Spider World previously, she has written the miniseries Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt, which was part of that Blood Hunt storyline that I talked about. She's also written a recent story in the Edge of the Spider-Verse sort of compilation issues where she introduced a character called Star Spider, and it was one of my favorite little stories from the most recent kind of volume. She's perhaps most known for her Star Wars comics, but this is really her stepping up into the big leagues, and it'll be very interesting to see what she does. And I think that's everything you need to know about 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. You're now ready to pick up the issue on Wednesday. Specifically, that's Wednesday the 13th of November if you're watching this later. And you can pick up the series, and it's a brand new start, a new way to pick up Spider-Man, and a very kind of mystical story. We're hopefully going to see some things from the past, some things in his mind. He's going to deal with both physical and mental threats, and I'm very excited. Please let me know in the comments below what you're excited about, if you read it, what you liked, what you didn't like, and we'll see you on the other side.